Hello everyone, welcome to my first ever Human Organic Tutorials series. The idea behind this series is that we'll go step by step how to create a human organic from the beginning planing stages to the smoothing, to the shaping, to the texturing. We're going to go through all of those steps and hopefully by the end you'll have a wonderful organic all built. I do want to preface though that in this series I will be using different building commands, whether it be from Worldedit, Voxelsniper, Fast Async Worldedit, or Arceon. Those are the top ones where I will be using commands from. If you don't have access to those commands, I'm going to try my best to give you alternatives to do instead, but the same principles apply whether you use commands or not. I do already have several other videos that go over different tips for organics or different commands to use. I'm probably going to be repeating a lot of the same things I mentioned in those videos. I'm going to try to be as in-depth as I can with this, and hopefully by the end you'll be a pro at organics. Keep in mind, throughout this series I'm going to be showing you my personal way of building. It's by no means the only way to go about doing it, but hopefully you can still learn something out of it and apply it to your own method of building. The first step to any Minecraft project, or any art project for that matter, is to have an idea. There are a lot of ways people come up with ideas. I would imagine that if you're watching this video, you probably already have your ideas in your head and you just want to know how to execute them. But still, it is important once you do have your idea to research and plan it and know exactly what you're going for. I highly recommend having some kind of a reference, whether it be somebody else's art or even your own art that you're using to help give you a rough idea of what you're going for. A lot of the times when you're building in Minecraft, you really can't tell what you're doing unless you actually had a reference to go off of. You could use pre-existing art or characters as a reference if that's something that you were trying to do, trying to recreate something that already exists. What I like to do a lot of the times is try to make unique stuff as much as I can, so I will create my own sketches and my own references. I have designed this elven character that we're going to be building in this series. This is my own original character design. I just came up with the idea and made a little sketch of her. I actually made 2 different sketches of her, just in different poses and playing around with the poses. Something that you do want to keep in mind in this early stage of planning is figuring out a pose for your organic. I do want to mention that you don't want it to be stiff or flat or boring. You don't want to have an organic that's just standing there with the arms flat to the side, because who does that? Do you ever see people that just stand around with their arms by their side staring into the distance? You want to make them look like they're alive. Even if they have the slightest movement, they can be standing still, but maybe they have their arms crossed. Or maybe they're just putting more weight on one leg than another, so they're kind of off balance. That being said, we are going to be building this particular pose that I have sketched. It's a very simple one. She's just mid-walk, but it still shows motion through her legs and she doesn't look stiff at all. If you're just getting started into organics, I really do recommend starting with some kind of mid-action pose or something that's more dynamic. This is not the most dynamic pose ever, but you can tell that she's in the middle of an action. In this case, she's in the middle of taking a step. I think doing some kind of action pose is the best thing you can do as a beginner, not only because it will help you learn a lot more faster, but it also does just look better and make a more interesting composition. Now that you have your reference, we're going to deconstruct it and figure out what exactly is the first step of building this. Well, obviously, the first step for me is to do the posing and sizing inside of Minecraft. Looking at your reference, you need to analyze it and figure out what order you're going to build things in. Obviously, you can't build everything straight away. You have to start from just the basic shapes and work your way up to the finer details. Doing a human organic like this, I'm going to start with the basic framework or the pose of the character. Then we're going to work on refining the form of the body and figuring out all the muscle shapes. And once that's solidified, we can add the clothing and all of the other details and coloring. And that's all there is to it, but you really do have to think about how you're going to break it apart. You can't obviously try to do everything at once. Let's jump in game and work on the first step of figuring out the posing and the size that we want to build this at. The tricky part about this is you're going to have to determine what size you're going to make your organic. I am building this in 1.16.5, so I only have 256 blocks available to me, so I'm not going to go any bigger than that. I'm probably not even going to use that full height because that would take forever to build that. Just know the bigger you make it, the more detail you will be able to add, but it will also take you a little bit longer. Likewise, the smaller you make it, you won't be able to add as much detail, but it probably won't take you as long. And really the scale that you choose for your organic depends on what you want to include around it. For an organic like this one that we're going to make, I don't really have plans for too many big things surrounding it, so I could make it go full block height if I wanted to, but I also need to keep in mind things that go above the head, in this case the staff. Also take into consideration anything you want to add on the ground. We want to make sure we don't make this full block height because we want to make sure we have extra space for any kind of terrain or a base for her to stand on. You can build your organic at whatever size you want. I'm going to be building mine fairly large just because I like to include a lot of detail. Even though it does take a little longer, it's just my preference. The very beginning of building an organic is always the most difficult for me just because you have nothing and you don't even know how to start. But I always start with the wireframe first, so let's go ahead and do that first. What I usually like to do when figuring out the wireframe or just the basic pose of my character, what we're really doing is going to map out the joints first and then connecting those with lines just to get the framework or the skeleton of our organic. So I'm going to place a wool block here. I usually like to model in wool just because that's what I'd use. I know other people use other things, that's just my block of choice. I'm going to fly up a little ways wherever I think the knee is going to go, and I'm going to go ahead and put a block there. I just used the command up1 to generate a glass block where I was standing. So I'm just going to generate that, pretending that's the knee joint, and then I'm going to go up a little more, and this will be the hip joint right there. So just imagine that when we connect these dots, a leg is going to go there, and I'm going to adjust these as I see fit. Right now they seem like they aren't straight enough because I'm trying to do her left leg right now, so it is a bit straighter. So I'm trying to figure out exactly where these are going to go. If it does help you, you could always generate a small sphere in these places, and maybe we'll do that just so you can see them a little bit more clearly. We can take a little brush. I'm just going to create a basic sphere brush. We will make it a different color too, which is something I don't normally do, but since we're learning here, we will do this. We'll do a light gray, and we'll make it a size of 2. And I'm just going to put that on those joints there. And I'm going to make sure to mask air when I do this one because I don't want it to go into the ground. Okay, so these are my joints. I'm going to do another one over here. Let's see. Trying to figure out where the hips might go. And as you can see, as far as how tall to make this, I'm really just making it up. If I want to scale it up later, I will, but right now I'm just kind of guessing. I'm going to put this knee almost in line with that knee because the only part that's really bending on this leg is the lower part of the leg. It's going to be bending backwards because she's taking a step. So I'm going to put that there, put that there. If you use your imagination, you can connect these dots and kind of see where the pose is going. Let's go ahead and connect these a little bit now. You can connect these with Worldedit or Voxelsniper. They each have their own different line commands. If you're using Voxelsniper, the command is line, and what I usually like to do is change the voxel to white wool. And if you're using Worldedit, you just have to make a selection. I'll show you both. I'll just show you both so you can see how each one works, and you can decide whichever one you want to use. So with Voxelsniper, I'm going to right-click on this one, take the gunpowder, and right-click up there, and that will connect it with a line. And same thing right here, I'm going to take this, connect it up to here, and we'll do this one too with Voxelsniper, and we'll take that, connect it to there. So now you can see we've got one leg, the hips, but now I need to get this other leg. I'll show you the same thing that you can do, but with Worldedit. So with Worldedit, you just have to use a cuboid selection, make your first point at the first tip of the line, second point down here, And then I just do the command line. I'm going to do 350 for white wool and make the size 0, and then it will do the same thing. And let's see, we'll do that same thing down here. We'll say this point to, let's go to this point. And then we'll do that line command, and there. So they both work just as well. It really depends on what your preference is. Voxelsniper does require 2 different tools to use, and Worldedit you just have to type out the command. So really whichever one is easier for you. I'm just going to select one block there in the middle, and I'm just going to stack this up to figure out how tall this is going to go. So let me see, if I stack this 50 up, I think that if we did that, I think I'm already seeing that my legs are too short for how wide apart they are. So you really do have to evaluate this as you go. If you're seeing something's really off, like already, if I went with this, the torso is too tall, the legs are too short for that torso size. So what I would have to do is move it up. I'm going to just start adjusting this now, because if I don't, it's going to bother me later. So I'm just going to select those 2 top joints. I'm going to move this, I'll just move it a few blocks up. And I just realized my G mask is on, so let me turn that off. Move that up again. Okay, I think I need to move this part up now. I think I just need to make all of the legs longer, so I'm just going to be making a mess of my wireframe at the start. I never can get it right the first time, and I don't expect you to get it right the first time. It's just one of those things that you're going to have to experiment with and figure out. This one, I'm going to move 5 up. Let me see. That does look a little bit better. I think this leg over here needs to be moved as well, but first let me finish connecting these. I might have to move some stuff again here in a moment, but let me see if I can finish the rest of the wireframe first before going too much into this. I think the torso does need to be a little bit taller. Now that I look at this, now that we've adjusted the legs, I do think this can go a little bit taller. So let me just stack this 10 more up, just slightly, and I'm going to go off of this now and try to figure out where the shoulders go. Now, shoulders are basically going to be directly above where the hips are, but it's okay if they're not exactly in front of it, because when you think about it, your whole body twists and bends when you move. Your shoulders aren't always going to be square with your hips. So if you want more motion with this organic, what I might do, since her arm is leaning forward, I might put her right shoulder a little bit forward from her hip. That's just an example. So if I do up one here and say this is where the right shoulder is going, it's not going to be directly in line with the hip, it's just slightly forward, but that's because I'm thinking about how the arm is going to be moving. So this one, likewise, we could have the shoulder slightly back and kind of making her whole upper body twisting a little bit. Any little movement that you can add to your organic like that, even though it's subtle, it really does make a big difference. So I'm going to put that one there. You can say those are the shoulders. And I'm going to figure out the elbows now. This one, I'm going to have it extended out a little bit. I'm going to put that there. Oh, I think I can move that a little further over this way. Put it over here. And this really just comes with practice, knowing where to put things. And if you're confused about the proportions of everything, like where a joint goes in relation to something else, I would recommend looking up a reference of actual proportions and how everything aligns with the body. You can see exactly where the elbow should land in relation to the torso, or where the wrists would land if they were exactly landing by your legs. Little things like that that can really help you know exactly how to play stuff, but right now I'm just kind of making it up. We're just in the early stages, and there's plenty of time to fix it later. Now go ahead and connect all your joints again. It doesn't matter if you're landing it perfectly in the center, this is really just for a reference. So just get the lines in there and we'll evaluate it afterwards. Go ahead and work on your wireframe as much as you need to till you get it where you're pretty happy with it. I think this is a pretty good start for mine. I did go back and readjust things by making a lot of selections and moving things. I'm trying to be as precise as I can for this tutorial, although usually when it comes to this stage, I'm usually not that precise, but I think this is a pretty good start. So I just like to get the legs, the arms, and I'm not going to worry about the head yet, but if you want to just get an idea of how tall the head is going to go, we can go ahead and take this block and stack it up a little bit. Maybe just so you can kind of get an idea. If you wanted to put a giant ball in place of the head, or just a giant sphere up there, then you could do that too. I don't think I'm going to bother, but that'll give me an idea of how tall this organic is going to be. I didn't plan any specific size for this organic, but if we're going to have it about this height, it's going to end up being probably around 200 blocks total. I'm not exactly sure, because the staff that she's holding is going to stick up a little bit above her head. So I could go a lot bigger with this, but I think for this tutorial, this is a pretty decent size to start with. So we're just going to keep it here. However, if you did want to go bigger or smaller, what you can do is take this, or even after we do the next step, take it and use the scale command by selecting around it and scaling it up. If you wanted to make it slightly larger, I do that all the time with some of my larger organics where I model them much smaller, even smaller than this. I'll model them really small and then I'll scale that up just because it's a lot easier to model things on a smaller scale, just so you can see the distance more easily, or so you can set the distance of all the limbs more easily. But this is a good start, and let's go ahead and move on to the next step, which will be starting to fill in some of the muscles. Now that we have this wireframe done, we can start to add the muscle shapes. So I'm just going to think about all of the basic muscles in the body and just start to map them out using Voxelsniper. I do have a copy of the wireframe. I'm going to make a copy as I go just so you can see each step as we go. So I'm going to start modeling on this. Actually, I think what I'm going to do first is replace all of those light gray blocks with white blocks. I normally don't make them a different color, I just did that so you could see them more easily. I'm just going to replace those light gray blocks with some white wool, just like that. Now, what I usually like to do to start filling in some of the muscles, I like to use Voxelsniper. You could also use Worldedit if you wanted to, but I do prefer using Voxelsniper for this. And I'm just going to use the brush blend ball at /BBB. I'm going to use the blend ball brush, give it a size of, I don't know, 5. I can always adjust that later. I do sometimes use Worldedit too, but I'm just going to start with this and see how well it goes. So I'm going to start with the gunpowder because this will allow me to pull up shapes. So I'm just going to slowly go over this with the Voxelsniper and just slowly think about how the muscles are being formed. I know there's other ways of doing this. I know sometimes people might use the command spike from Arceon in order to lay out some basic things. I might try that on one of these limbs just so we can see how that works, but most of the time I just like to do it very manually and slowly. It gives me time to think about what I'm doing, and I don't know, it just is relaxing sometimes, so I enjoy it. But I'm just going to slowly build out this shape here. Bring out the hips a little bit. But what you do want to make sure you're doing at this stage especially is that you're inspecting it from every angle. Something I noticed about my model already is that I made the back completely straight. If you look at this wireframe, see how the spine is completely straight? That's very unnatural, it's just how I made it. But I'm going to be fixing that now that I have the muscles I'm adding. I'm going to try to make sure to add a little bit of a bend or a little bit of a curve to the spine because we don't want it to be completely straight. We do want to show movement and all of that. So I'm just going to keep adding to this here, using the gunpowder to pull out blocks, and I can use the arrow to push back the blocks. And it doesn't matter if this is completely smooth. Right now, we're just trying to get the basic shapes. I feel like experimenting with a different type of tool to get the rest of this done. Let's see how well the spike command will work for these legs. In order to use the spike command, I need a convex selection. So let's see, select convex. And if you don't have this, this is from Arceon, so you're going to have to make sure you have Arceon to use this. If you don't have it, don't worry about it. I'm just trying to experiment and see what other types of commands I can do to get these shapes faster. But if I'm using the spike command with the convex selection, I would select my points like that. I'm just going to start with this piece of the leg, and I'm going to do spike 35, 0. I'm going to choose my the start radius. I'm just going to choose something big and end on something slightly smaller, and we'll see what that does. It'll automatically fill in a spike shape. That's not super noticeable. Let me go over it again with 10. You can kind of see it a little better there. See how it's thicker at the top and it gets skinnier down there? So that's another way you can quickly fill in muscles if you want to do that way. One thing about this though is that it does make it very, very stiff, very straight, which can be a good thing. As long as your wireframe is pretty good, then I'm sure you wouldn't have to worry about messing around with that too much. Let me go ahead and do this one now. So this one's going to go down to the ankle. And by the way, this is more of the heel, not the ankle, because the ankle would probably be a few blocks above that, right? So I'm just going to do that. And let me see. I'm going to try going from 6 to 10 back to 6. Okay, that did not work out very well. So sometimes you're just going to have to experiment with this until you get something you like. I think I can only enter, I think that was too many numbers. Let's try 9 to 5. Let's try that. All right, that's obviously too big. Let's try 9 to 3. So it doesn't work perfectly, as you can see. That's not the correct shape at all, but I just wanted to show it to you in case you thought it would be helpful. And I'm actually just going to go over this with my brush because I do want a different shape there. I'm trying to make the shape of a calf muscle there. All right. And I think for the other leg, yeah, I might as well go ahead and try the spike command just because I don't normally use it and it's good practice. And I'm going to run the one we just did, that one. So the knee, I just made the knee way too big, but these are all things we're going to be fixing as we go. I really do think that shaping the organics, sometimes it feels like it takes the longest. Sometimes I feel like I spend half of my time just doing the shaping stage. Coloring and texturing can take a long time too, but I make sure to put a lot of time into shaping and I don't rush anything. And sometimes it can take me months to do a single organic because of that, but maybe it's just because I'm slow, or maybe it is just because I'm that picky. I really couldn't say for sure, but just don't rush it. And don't worry if your organic isn't coming together right away. There's always going to be a messy stage. I mean, my organic's looking pretty messy right now. All of my organics start this way though, just pretty boring and bland. Something that I see a lot of people do incorrectly is under the arms here. You want to make sure that that's like really cut into the body. You don't want it to be too smooth here. And while we're not going to go into completely smoothing this over, you can go ahead and smooth it a little bit using your blend ball brush. It's not going to be perfectly smooth yet, but it does give you an idea of how big everything's going to be. You see how I'm giving her torso a little bit of a twist? I might need to adjust her leg back a little bit, but it really depends on how her walk is going to go. Because if she's walking, I do want to make sure that this makes sense with whatever motion she's doing. Her left leg should remain forward, but I just need to make her look like she's standing firmly on the ground. That's something else that you just have to think about, just to evaluate it and see if she looks like she's actually keeping her balance. Now, right now, it's kind of hard to tell because she doesn't have any feet, but we'll get there. I'm just working on it very slowly. Let's go ahead and add some feet just so we can kind of see what they're doing. I'm going to take that sphere brush that I had before and I'm just changing the material to white wool. I'm going to make sure to G-mask the air again to make sure it doesn't affect anything. I'm just going to pull those out. And I'm not shaping these too well right now. I'm just kind of getting an idea of how long they are. This one is going to be in the air, just kind of going down like that. And yep, that's good enough. I'm just gonna continue to go around, turn off my G mask because now it's messing up my blend ball brush. So go ahead and spend some time working on your muscle shapes. Don't rush it. If you want to adjust some limbs, go for that. But I'm just gonna work on mine. The more I work on this, the more mistakes I see with my wireframe. So yeah, don't worry if you're finding mistakes now, because you're always going to be fixing stuff like right up until you're coloring. I think that this shoulder needs to come out a little more, so I'm going to go ahead and select this and move it out a little bit more if I can. I'm just going to select that whole arm. I got the wrong selection. Sometimes you can't tell if something's going to work or not until you get the muscles starting to add and you realize, oh, that was a little bit too close to where it was before. So let me see if I can get this without messing up. I keep putting my points in the wrong places. Okay, got that arm selected, or most of it. It's good enough. Let's go ahead and move that a couple blocks out. I think that looks a little better. So yeah, don't be afraid to start tearing it apart and fixing it. Obviously, the wireframe is just a guide for the pose. It's not really going to be perfect for the proportions right away. This is the part where I really do focus more on proportions. Also, remember I was saying about the shoulders not blending in with the rest of the body? Like this right here looks really bad. So I think the easiest way for me to fix this is to get a second brush. I'm going to get a different brush than that axe. Let me use a netherite sword, and I'm going to make it a sphere brush, but I'm going to make it place air with a radius of 1, and then I'm going to tell it to mask the wool. And now I can just carve tiny bits of where I want those to go away. Then I can go back here, smooth it over. I'm going to rearrange this so it's easier for me. There we go. So I can use this to smooth, I can use this to carve away, and I can use this to pull up blocks. So this is usually the combination of commands that I like to use, and it's probably not the most efficient, but it works, and it works for me, so I like it. I'm noticing that the rib cage area is also too skinny. I think a lot of it too is this arm is also getting cut off. And notice how my organic is slightly leaning to the side. I think that was unintentional, but I do kind of like it, because it does give her a little bit more movement. She's kind of angled. I'm probably still going to build her face looking straight ahead, but see how her hips are twisting, so her whole body is kind of moving with that, and it just looks a little more dynamic, even though it's just because it's on a slight angle. You don't have to do that. I think mine just ended up being like that accidentally, but it is something interesting to keep in mind. Like I said before, do not rush this stage, really just take your time with it and try to get it as close as possible. Don't worry about getting it perfectly smooth, because we are not doing that at this stage. I'm going to go over the smoothing and how to refine all the different shapes in the next video, but for right now, just get the basic muscles down. Also, looking back at my organic, I realized it was a little bit too short for my taste, so like I said before, don't be afraid to make adjustments to the overall height and proportions at this stage. I do this all the time, and I think my newer, taller organic looks much closer to my reference. Alright, so I'm going to call this the end of the first part of the series. I do have several more videos I want to do after this as we continue to work through our organic. Next time, like I said, I do plan on showing you how to smooth this properly, because right now, so far, we've just been using brushes, and brushes is not good enough for smoothing, at least not for me. So we are going to go back through the entire thing, re-smooth it, reshape things like the head, the hands, and the feet, all those finer details. We're going to get those in the next video and progress from there. I don't know when I'll have the next video ready, but I'll work on getting that out as soon as I can, and I'll link to it down below as soon as it is. Until then, have fun building, and I'll see you later.